Bonjour. Quel plaisir de vous voir aussi nombreux à cet événement, sans conteste un événement phare de cette 15e édition du Festival du film et Forum international sur les droits humains. Donc, merci beaucoup aux partenaires de la soirée, notamment la Graduate Institute et Christophe Collet. Mais je vais laisser mon très cher collègue et responsable éditorial du Forum, Philippe Motta, lui et son équipe ont travaillé pendant des mois pour cet événement. Merci beaucoup et on peut aussi dire bravo.
Merci Isabelle. Ce festival serait évidemment impossible sans Isabelle Gattier, elle est l'âme. Vous le savez, elle l'a condamnée. Isabelle Gattier. C'est un plaisir immense de vous accueillir ici ce soir. Et je pensais à une phrase de Swift. Swift disait « Les éléphants sont toujours dessinés plus petits que nature et les puces plus grandes ». Quand à Genève, vous accueillez la présidente du Brésil et quand vous accueillez un procureur indien, pour parler de droits économiques et sociaux, il faut changer d'échelle. Il faut changer d'échelle. Imaginez donc 1,2 milliard de personnes en Inde, 200 millions de personnes au Brésil. Nous sommes à Genève, ou en Suisse, dans un pays de 8 millions d'habitants. L'échelle, par conséquent, et qui est aussi la mesure de ce qui a été accompli dans ces deux pays, est absolument exceptionnelle. Rendez-vous compte que grâce au travail de Colin Gonçalves que vous entendrez tout à l'heure, 280 millions d'enfants en Inde ont eu accès à de la nourriture. C'est ça que ça signifie les droits économiques et sociaux, et c'est de ça que nous parlerons. Et on va vous expliquer, ils vont vous expliquer,
So they are going to explain to you with Darius Rochebin how they managed to do that. You can imagine that the work in Brazil allowed 28 million Brazilians to get out of poverty and hunger. So this is something which we have to show respect for. So I invite you to have a conversation with a conference, with a presentation of Dilma Rousseff, who is going to explain to you how they managed to make all these 28 million people come out of poverty. I wish you a very good afternoon.
Voilà, mesdames et messieurs, merci de votre accueil. Merci, Madame la Présidente, bien sûr. On va tester l'interprétation parce que c'est un point très important que vous entendiez les interventions, les questions, peut-être aussi pour vous, mesdames et messieurs dans le public, qu'on nous dise bien. Donc, je crois que c'est le canal 3 pour vous. Et pour ceux qui... On va vérifier ça pendant que... Nous vous disons quelques mots d'introduction. Philippe Motta disait à quel point il faut prendre la mesure de la présence de Dilma Rousseff ici et du témoignage qu'elle peut apporter. Et précisément avec Philippe Motta, nous faisions compte hier des femmes qui ont été élues à la tête de 6 grands pays. Et elles sont en réalité très peu nombreuses. Et c'est dire à quel point Dilma Rousseff est de fait un personnage historique. Vous pouvez faire le compte avec nous. Indira Gandhi sans doute, Margaret Thatcher, aujourd'hui Angela Merkel, quelques autres, sans remonter évidemment à des femmes reines ou impératrices qui n'ont pas été élues. Dilma Rousseff a été élue 2 fois présidente du Brésil à la tête de 200 millions de personnes. Je vous laisse faire le compte, c'est combien de fois la Suisse?
How many,
Je crois que c'est 25 fois.
persons, how many times
Vous êtes
is it
25 fois
Switzerland?
plus grand
So
que
you
nous,
are
mais
25
vous avez un avis sur la Suisse, vous le direz tout à l'heure, Madame la
greater
Présidente.
than Switzerland. So you are going to give you
Vous avez beaucoup de caractère. Hier, j'ai enregistré une émission avec vous, c'est très difficile de vous interrompre.
Yesterday, I did a program with you on TV. It was very difficult to interrupt you. A little Swiss man against
Il y a une femme qui avait
Brazilian
beaucoup de
woman.
caractère, c'est Catherine II. Et
There was a
je serai
woman
pas long en
with a lot
citation,
of
après c'est
character.
vous
It
qu'on veut
was
entendre.
Catherine
Mais
II.
elle recevait Diderot qui voulait lui
Tsarine.
présenter
She
ses
received
plans de
Diderot who
réforme.
wanted to present
Et
to
Catherine
her
II a
his
dit à Diderot,
reform plans. And
la
Catherine
grande
II said
différence
to
de nos deux
Diderot, the
positions,
big difference
c'est que
between
vous,
our two
vous
positions is
travaillez
that
sur
you
le papier,
are working on
qui souffre
paper,
tout.
and
Alors que
paper
moi,
just bears everything.
je travaille
And
sur la
I am
peau humaine
working on
qui est
human
autrement
skin,
irritable.
which is very
Diriger un si grand
quickly
État,
becoming
c'est
allergic.
travailler sur la peau humaine.
So
Et c'est très
your
facile
work,
évidemment de donner des
being
leçons ici à Genève.
man of
Et
state
comme
or
on
a
le disait
woman of
tout à l'heure,
state,
l'échelle et
is
la
to work
complication
on
est
human
tellement plus
skin,
vaste
and the
quand
complexity
on est
is
à la tête du
much
Brésil,
bigger
de l'Inde
if
ou
you are
d'autres pays
heading
qu'on
a
évoquera.
country like Brazil or
Dilma
India.
Rousseff, pendant une
Dilma
demi-heure
Rousseff,
tout à l'heure, vous
you are
expliquera
going
son
to
programme
explain
contre la faim et la
your
misère. Mais
program
en
against
introduction,
hunger
j'aimerais,
and
Madame la
poverty.
Présidente, si vous voulez
But
venir au
as an
pupitre,
introduction, I
qu'on
would like
dise quelques
to
mots quand même de vous,
say a few
de là
words
où vous
about
venez,
you,
de là
where you
où
come from,
vos convictions se sont faites.
where do you
La
build
jeune
your
Dilma Rousseff,
convictions.
je crois que
The
vous étiez
young Dilma
adolescente
Rousseff, I think
quand
you were
vous
a
avez eu le
teenager
premier engagement
when you had
politique,
your
c'est bien
first
ça.
political commitment. Is that true?
Primeiro, boa noite a todos e a todas. Eu queria agradecer e cumprimentar aqui os organizadores do festival e o Roger Rocheban e o Darius Rocheban e dizer o seguinte: eu venho do Brasil e eu sou um produto da vida política, da história e do povo brasileiro. E eu tinha 15 anos quando a ditadura militar
I was 15
foi
when the
instaurada
military
no Brasil.
dictatorship
O que
was set
aconteceu
up
de
in Brazil, and
terrível não foi apenas
what happened,
que se tirasse
what was
um
terrible
governo
then,
popular
it was
eleito
not
pelo povo
only
e que queria
the
fazer
fact
transformações,
that
que era o
popular
governo
an elected
João Goulart
government
na época, que propunha
who
conjunto
wanted
de
to
reformas
transform
no
the
Brasil.
society
O que é
was
terrível
just
num
put
golpe
aside.
é
It was a government who
perda
wanted
de
to
esperança
do
na
some reforms in
democracia.
Brazil. But what is terrible when you have a coup like that, the people lost hope
A
in
gente
democracy.
pensava, como
This is was the case for my
possível
generation. We were thinking, how is it possible to transform Brazil
extremamente desigual se
such
quando as coisas começam a melhorar, vêm
unequitable
os militares e dão um golpe de Estado.
every time
Então nós
something
perdemos
is
confiança, eu
improving,
venho
the
disso.
military come
aí,
and make a coup.
Eu sou
And
de
we
uma
lost
geração
trust.
que
I
resolveu
am from a
assumir
generation
uma resistência efetiva que nós
who
considerávamos
decided to
efetiva
resist,
ao
and
governos,
we
aos governos
considered
militares.
it a real resistance toward the
Fomos
military
para a
regime.
resistência armada.
And so we
Muitos de
went
nós
into armed
Foram
resistance.
mortos, outros presos, outros
Many of
exilados.
us died, many
Certamente
were
todos os
put
presos
into
torturados.
jail,
Então
others
eu
were
venho desse
exiled,
momento
went into
político
exile,
no
and
Brasil,
everybody
que me ensinou
has
o
been
valor da
tortured.
democracia.
This is the context I come from, and
Vous
this
avez
taught me
été
the value of
arrêté,
democracy.
torturé. Ça n'est jamais indifférent dans le
You
parcours
have
d'une
been
femme ou d'un homme.
tortured.
Ça a été
This
une
is
rupture pour
something
vous.
very pivotal in the life of a person. How was
Olha,
it important
eu
for
acho
you?
que o processo que levou no Brasil
I think
a
that
minha
the
prisão, eu
process
fiquei 3 anos presas.
which
Como eu disse, todo
led
mundo que era
me
preso era
to
torturado.
be arrested,
Era
as I told
torturado
you,
porque
all the people who have
eles
been arrested have
queriam-
been tortured. We have
eles
all
não
been
que-
tortured
eles não queriam
because
nos prender, eles queriam nos destruir.
they
Houve
didn't want to
momento,
arrest us, they
inclusive,
wanted to
que quem
destroy
era preso
us.
era morto.
And
Eu,
it was
como
a
fui preso
time
no ano-
when the
nos anos
people
70,
being
e não
arrested
em
were
72,
killed
eu não fui
immediately.
morto.
So
Mas os presos em
I have
72
been
eram mortos.
arrested a bit later, so I wasn't
A
killed.
tortura
But
deixa marcas.
the people who
Agora,
have been
ela
arrested
deixa
in
mais
72,
marcas,
they have
depende
been
da pessoa.
killed.
Ela
But
sempre
torture
é
leaves
destrutiva. Mas ela é tão destrutiva,
traces,
tão
but
fortemente destrutiva que ela contamina a
it
sociedade,
contaminates
que permite a
the
tortura,
society
porque
who
também
allows
contamina a instituição que faz a tortura.
to torture
E
because it contaminates also the whole institution who is committing such things. And on many people it leaves traces which you cannot erase. And the important thing for Brazil is to have a democratic state. It was important as well to manage to go on strike without being arrested, to give one's opinion, because to give one's opinion at that time meant that you were going to be arrested, and to have another political life than that was the dominant ideology. And this is only the democracy which allows it in Brazil. And I would like to say it's not only the case for Brazil. Terrible or worse things happened even in Argentina, in Uruguay, and in Chile. So in all these countries, we learned the same thing, the value of the building up of a democracy. Not any democracy, but a democracy which would guarantee the freedom of expression, but also the social and economic rights. Mr. President, we know what happened after that, your presidency, then your destitution. We have seen that from the point you started, and now, presently, I would like you to explain your plan against poverty. So you will have the opportunity to speak during a half an hour.
Eu vou começar dizendo para vocês que no Brasil
I'm going to start by telling that in Brazil we live in a very special situation concerning poverty. We have been one of the last countries in Latin America and one of the last countries in the world to abolish slavery, which lasted until 1888. So there is an important part of poverty in Brazil which is linked to the privilege of a country which was still had slavery 150 years ago. What happened? We need to have a strong intention to put an end to hunger, poverty, and extreme poverty. And to do so, it was very complicated, because although we are a country which was much smaller than China or India, we had a huge problem. A country with 200 million inhabitants, with over 8 million square kilometers, and the poverty is spread across all Brazil. So it was a huge population and a huge territory as well, which meant that you had to concentrate on a strong axis to eliminate poverty and hunger. We started in 2003. We can see on this graphic the blue line is the line of the population living in poverty, and the red line is the population in extreme poverty. So you can see from 91 to 2014 there was a strong decrease of poverty, and Dilma Rousseff was president at the time, so the inflation and poverty started to diminish. Then we had a period. I do not have enough hands. It was a period of government, Fernando Henrique Cardoso, who didn't implement consistent consistent measures to fight poverty. So poverty remained constant. Then in 2003, Lula is elected, and since until the end of my term, he had a real program of fight against poverty and extreme poverty. And you see that the decrease has been quite strong. We came to 3.1%, which is considered as a level where extreme poverty is overcome. So for the rest of the 3% remaining, you have to go to the people, you have to find them in an active way. So this green line shows you the level from which it is considered by UN and by OCDE that the country is out of poverty. So the population living in a hunger situation is also decreasing. In order to fight against hunger, you have to increase the incomes, you have to give access to services, and also to fight significantly and in a constant way on a broad scale, not only increasing the revenues by social programs. This reduction we managed to reach was recognized by the FAO, who withdrew us from the hunger map. And with this reduction of 82%, we were the third country in the world who had the strongest decrease of the number of people in food insecurity. So the policy allowed us to eliminate hunger. During this period, we managed to create 20.6 million formal jobs. This was very important. We had also a significant increase of the minimum wages because we adopted a policy of improving the value of the jobs, even when our opponents would say that this policy was successful because of the development of inflation, which was completely wrong, because our policy was based on the evolution of the productivity of the present year. So the salary would just absorb what it produced. If the production was increased, it was just for the salaries to increase the next year. So this and the freezing of the salaries and the wages is the result of the neoliberal policies. We didn't only work in urban areas, we also worked in rural areas where 70% of our nutrition and food comes from little farms. So we managed to increase and to improve the credit system to small farms. And so we came from $1 to $0.3 billion to 30 billions of reals, 9.3 billions of dollars, by supporting the small farmers who supply with about 60% of food in the country. So Brazil has a great agriculture for export, but the food of the Brazilian families is supplied by little farmers.
So not only to guarantee the quality of the food of the Brazilians, but also to improve the life of these farmers, and also to reduce the level of poverty and the extreme misery that was actually very high in the Brazilian country and rural areas. But it's not just thanks to credit for farmers that were able to actually improve our policies. So, a great part of the people living in the rural areas did not have access to electricity, and some had never even seen a light bulb. And when there was energy made available, people used to actually switch on and switch off the light to see what it was like. I mean, it was like magic. They would switch it on, switch it off, because at the beginning, their children thought it was, fun, attractive, and they'd never, they were able to actually see their child sleeping because they'd never been able to do so because they were in the dark before. So there was a definite improvement of the living conditions, and there was also the being able to also watch television. This increased people's self-esteem. And there's a photograph I always have on my desk where you see a group of children.
Numa casa de barro, assistindo televisão pela
And
primeira vez.
actually in a mud house, and that they were watching television for the very first time. So then, the crop insurance and the public procurement of the product from family farmers for school canteens, thanks to a program I will be telling you more about in a few minutes. Now let's talk about the urban areas. And in the Brazilian towns and cities, there are many people, who have set up a small business, and these people needed access to credit. Some sell popcorn.
Dos times de futebol.
And on the way out from the football stadiums, they have little popcorn stands, and others have very small businesses, or hairdressers, or nail bar, or people selling sandwiches in the streets. So what we've done is to set up a program so that these people actually get them included in formal economy, and we provided them access to credit. This made it possible for 5 million people to have a better level of
sem dúvida nenhuma, o
life
mais
conditions.
conhecido programa nosso é conhecido pela ONU, por todos os órgãos internacionais, é o Bolsa Família.
Such by the United
Bolsa
Nations and
Família foi
all
criado lá atrás
international
no governo Lula.
organizations. That is the Bolsa Familia that was created during the Lula's government. Most of the programs we set up was at that time, and not at the beginning of my first mandate. So this program, Bolsa Familia, had as an objective to ensure that families living thanks to informal economy, to provide them with a certain level of income. And we started by 3.6 million households, for people households, but we've reached the number of 13.9 million of people who are families, households, that is. So these are households I'm talking about. Households are made up usually of young people who themselves have children, and who had no protection whatsoever. So, the Bolsa Familia was an addition to the country's social protection system. And thanks to the school food program, we've made it possible for 43 million children and teenagers, 43 million children. So we actually provided them with access to food every day. And I'm not talking about cups of tea. I'm talking about pulse, meat, rice, real food, and vegetables. So 43 million children and teenagers were able to actually have access to daily meals at school. So this is one of the explanations. So as you can see, so we've increased the protein content of the Brazilian diet. So we were providing them with proteins, meat. And Bolsa Familia is a program that helped out 13.9 million families, and it actually managed to keep 36 million people out of extreme poverty. so able to get these people out of extreme. And there's a multiplying effect, of course, on the growth of economy. That goes to say that for $1 invested in the Bolsa Familia, what you do is create a demand of more than 1.78, which goes to show that it is worth it from an economic standpoint. If you don't do it for ethical or moral reasons, then for economic reasons, it's worth eradicating poverty. And this is extremely important. It's essential to say it over and over again, because lots of people say, no, you've got to wait until there's actually the economy is back on track again. No, this will help actually with the economy. So the Bolsa Familia requires has conditions for access in terms of health, and women receive the money of the Bolsa Familia. Why is that? Because women actually play a central role in the Brazilian family. It's women, generally speaking, within the poorer of families, 90% of women are responsible for their children. I mean, their children are dependent on the women, and they are the ones who actually have to satisfy the conditions. Here are the conditions. So they have to vaccinate their children. So each child has to have 3 different vaccines. Pregnant women must at least go to have 3 mandatory prenatal examinations, and the children must has to actually attend at least 85% of classes at school, and this is the mother's responsibility, the women's responsibility of the family. This helped reduce early mortality. We vaccinated 99% of children, and de facto there was a definite improvement. As I said, 46% decrease in mortality due to diarrhea, and a definite improvement of the health conditions, and visible and quantifiable. So this goes to show that we've made some huge progress. Also on the blue line you have the overall population, and in the red line is the poor members of the population. So what we can see is that there is a tendency, a growing tendency for actually the 2 lines to meet, because the bottom line, which represents the poorer members of the population, has increased to 346% against 47% for the blue line. So what does it mean? What it means is that there's an improvement, and we were working hard on this. So here it's the same. So children between the ages of 6 and 14, where there was a difference between the poorest people and the overall population, those 2 lines are getting very, very close to one another. So what it means is that the situation is definitely improving in terms of school attendance, education. So here we see also reduction of what's called educational inequalities. We're talking about teenagers, 15-year-old students. So where should a 15-year-old kid be? Well, at school. So we can see, that these we see that more and more of the 15-year-olds are actually attending school. So the issue of poverty and misery and hunger is multidimensional. It doesn't just have to do with income. I mean, of course, income is very important, but you also have to have access to other types of services. So I prepared this slide to show you that Brazil had social benefits for the older members of the populations, the elders. So they would receive
eles ganhavam benefício que é salário
money when they would retire, a retirement pension, and they also had a minimum wage.
A família jovem. Por isso, a gente diz que o Bolsa Família completa
but the younger families didn't have coverage. That's why we say Bolsa Familia actually added to the social benefits of all of the Brazilian population.
Possa ser transformado numa nação desenvolvida.
So Brazil has been able to is on the track of becoming a developed
Bolsa
country.
Familia só é possível porque
Bolsa
nós
Familia
tínhamos uma plataforma digital.
was
Essa plataforma digital
family aid was only made possible thanks to actually a digital platform. So we've built since 2003, that is, and it was done step by step. So we have a unique registry. We knew where each family was, how many children was in that family, where the parents working, where they were going to school. We had all this information and what diseases they were suffering from. So we were able to do a sort of mapping and to avoid the political use of Bolsa Familia, and to avoid this being used by politicians was to have actually a credit, a banking card, a debit card. Each family was given a bank card, and every month they go to the bank and they receive. They can actually make a cash. They can receive cash in many areas of Brazil, in the branches of the bank, which is a very large Brazilian public bank, and they can actually draw the money from their program. So there's no intermediary whatever between the bank and the beneficiary. So this is a relationship that involves the recognition that the person receives is a fully fledged citizen. This is not someone who is
que seria devido não a si mesma, não ao fato dela ser uma cidadã brasileira ou cidadão brasileiro, mas porque alguém
it's not something that that person doesn't deserve, or because someone wanted to give them a gift. It's not like someone giving them alms. They're not beggars, so they keep their self-esteem. So what's important. So this role of women is primordial because women
do programa nós descobrimos que era
very important, and we realized that it was the most efficient way of guaranteeing the money being used for children, because a mother will never take the money from a child's mouth. I mean, she will take the money and will spend it for her children. We know this for a fact. And, whether it's in Switzerland, Brazil, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and every country of the world.
E aí, eu quero falar para vocês, nós não fizemos só nossa digital de combate à pobreza e à fome e à miséria, está em todos os programas. Nós fizemos grande programa de água
strategy to fight hunger and misery. We've included this everywhere. So we've set up a program for access to drinking water, and it was, of course, focusing on the poorer people in the northeast region of my country. It's a semi-arid, almost desertified area, the northeast part of the country, and there's a lot of people living in that area, northeast part of Brazil, and people who have very low income. So what we've done is to build these water cisterns. You can see them in white, and what they do is they collect rainwater, and 1,300,000 cisterns were set up to provide security in terms of drinking water, which is of course a must for people's lives. And these actually make up reservoirs of drinking water for the people who live in that area. We're talking about human consumption, of course, but also they need it also for the animals. And for the agricultural production.
Foco não era programa só para a população pobre, mas fizemos foco na população pobre.
There's another program that wasn't just intended for the population. This has to do more with housing, where we would actually subsidize those people with low income. So we would pay 90%. This is where we've invested most money. So this is the program that turned out to be the most costly, where we subsidized the property ownership. It cost $94.2 billion to be able to satisfy the need for housing. So a family needs to have a roof over their head. So what we wanted to do is to reduce the level of violence and to ensure that everyone could actually actually get out of this state of precariousness. And this program had a definite effect on improving these people's lives. Another program, which I'm giving to you as an example
Exemplo do você tinha de cruzar sempre, mesmo quando é programa de universalização,
an example of the way
você tem de cruzar sempre.
The need to always double-check information, and you have to find out, where the poor people, and always start with those with the lowest income. Otherwise, when you will, if you don't do that, there'll be more and more poor people. And we had actually a ratio of physicians per population very low, and so we had 1.8 doctors per 1,000 people. Argentina 3.2, Uruguay 3.7, Germany 3.6, Spain 4.1. And in Brazil, we had 1.8 doctors per 1,000 people. So what we did is we double-checked. We looked at the mapping of the lack of the number of doctors per 1,000 people and the map of hunger. So we decided, where did we need to position the doctors? So what turned out to be very interesting is that we found out where we needed doctors in the largest city of Brazil, which is Sao Paulo, in the most industrialized and in the richest state of Brazil. That is where there was the greatest need of physicians. There were no physicians for the poorest members of the population. And the fact of not having these doctors or physicians means that the patient goes once, twice, 3 times, but there's never any doctor available to see him or her. And besides the suburbs, the rural areas, the provinces,
além do interior,
the cities that are not on the coast.
Departamentos de saúde indígena, 38. O que é departamento de saúde indígena?
And also in the special indigenous health districts. I mean, we have Indians in Brazil and various regions, and especially those that are up north. And there is
já estão contactadas há muitos anos.
Indian who have been contacted long ago, and those who have just recently been in contact with the white man. And these people, the latter, are protected. They don't need any doctors, because quite the contrary, the more they're in contact with the white men, the more disease they can succumb to. But you have to adapt, of course, to the needs. But other people were actually dying because they did not have access to health care. So we set up 34 special indigenous health districts.
63 milhões de pessoas passaram a ter
63 million people, thanks to this program, were able to actually benefit from health care. And this is a program that wasn't just intended for the poor. There were 700 municipalities where there were no doctors whatsoever. And you had, people... I mean, this is not a program set up exclusively for the poor. But, of course, it was... in its implementation, of course, it was set up for access to healthcare for the poorest, and then what we had to do is to guarantee, ensure for these people. So I told you about the registry, and many people had very precarious jobs. So we had to work on vocational training for these people and technical training. And so then the person starts off being a basic electrician, and if he goes on, he ends up being a fully fledged electrician, being able to actually install a complex electrical system on actually a oil platform, for instance. And there was a program called the National Program for Technical Education, the PRONATEC. And this program, the National Program for Technical Education, wasn't just intended for the poor, but we gave them a priority, of course, for this program. And what we did was to train 9.4 million people, and 1.8 million were people who were from the poorer parts of the population.
E aí eu concluo a minha parte dizendo o seguinte para vocês.
Here's what I'd like to tell you as a conclusion, and he's already here, standing by me. I can see him from the corner of my eye.
Différence culturelle entre le Brésil et la Suisse, Dilma.
Mas eu concluo dizendo uma coisa para você.
So, what I'd like to
Primeiro, que o fim da miséria é só um começo. Que essa é a
ending
grande
extreme poverty is only the
afirmação que
beginning.
nós fizemos. Não há como
So this is what we keep saying over and over again. So you can't stop at the end of extreme poverty. You have to continue improving services. You have to increase inclusion in the world of productivity. So I hope, I'm sure you'll ask me questions because.
O que está acontecendo no Brasil
So I hope
hoje?
that you will ask me what is happening in Brazil today. And this was this whole program is being jeopardized. Hold on, I'm almost finished. So that's why he says I'm like Catherine of Russia. I told him he was like a Peter the Great. But
merci.
So he's taller than me. It's true, but nevertheless. Well, thank you. But no, just please, just allow me. I know. Okay, I'm explaining. So okay, I'm please. Ask. This is the question I want you to ask me. This program is jeopardized today, and the illegitimate government that replaced me is to put an end to this program. They want to actually put an end to social spending in Brazil. They have already, pulled out the poor people of the country of the budget, and they want to amend the constitutions. They're going to freeze for the next 20 years all social spending and health-related spending. And already today, they're on their way to this. So I'd like to conclude by saying this is crucial, and it's not because it's my government. It's because we have actually given evidence that it is possible to actually grow whilst redistributing resources. And if you have actually a social protection when there's a crisis, you can actually get out of it. Thank you.
S'il vous plaît, répondez assez court. D'accord? Pas trop long la réponse et après on passe à la suite. D'accord? Voilà, merci. Merci à Dilma Rousseff, merci mesdames et messieurs. Alors, nous allons maintenant voir le film dans un instant. Ensuite, vous pourrez poser des questions laudatives ou critiques, comme vous voudrez, à Dilma Rousseff. Et aussi, nous entendrons nos autres intervenants. Mais une question encore, Dilma, sur ce que vous avez présenté. Vous avez beaucoup de partisans ici, visiblement. Vous avez été une présidente très aimé, mais aussi très détesté à un certain moment. Comment est-ce que vous expliquez que, malgré ce programme, vous ayez été aussi détesté? Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé de votre point de vue pour que vous ayez été si impopulaire? Vous avez reconnu ça, hein? Vous avez été très impopulaire au Brésil, et ça a évidemment pesé dans la suite des événements. Comment vous expliquez?
Acredito que todo mundo aqui conhece uma coisa chamada luta política. Luta política é o seguinte.
All the countries, all the parties know what is political fight. I had the approbation of the people until the moment when the economical crisis struck Brazil. Crisis is something which crystallized, so we managed. At the end of 2014, we had 4.6% of people being jobless, but there was an acceleration and an increase of the prices and the services, and so we had this economical crisis. But I have been elected. It was the fourth election I won, and so I was elected twice. So it was the fourth election, and then suddenly they realized, and this was in November 2014. The crisis had arrived in Brazil, and so they understood they would not be able to approve the program they wanted through a democratic process. So they started to lead a systematic campaign against me, trying to recount the voices. They asked for an audit of the ballots. Until March 2015, they started to suggest destitution. So it started in March 2015. And I was accused, but I have to tell you, I cannot stop now. So I am being accused of something which has been formulated in March 2015. So they are going to try now against me. So at the end of 2015, so it was deliberate and it was made against me. No, they built that up in a very irresponsible way, this new process, and they thought that after my departure, they would be able to change the economical and political situation in the country. But the political situation is deteriorating, and the economical situation is also deteriorating. So this is going to be the topic of the discussion after the film. So, ladies and gentlemen, so we are going to watch this film, and then we are talking about corruption and the links with extreme poverty, like India. We have now a break. You will have a sign which allows you to go out and come back, and we come about in 10 minutes, 10-15 minutes to watch the film. See you later.
Dans la deuxième partie, on fait plus